Thank you for joining us on this catch-up relaxed episode after we've successfully survived the 4-duck problem. How are you feeling, Paolo?
I'm feeling full of criticism.
Really?
Yes.
Well, I'm feeling very relieved. It's been an undertaking that we have done. These 4 episodes covered the Lu Cixin's Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy. Thank you so much for listening if you've gone through the whole thing.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it was something. I got it's like an emotional, exhausting roller coaster. And on this episode, we'd like to just do a catch-up of books that we've read and we don't want to do the whole episode about. I'd like to cover some news about the podcast and also some listener messages. And at the end, if time allows, we'll mention some more stuff about the free body problem, which I can't get off my mind.
Yes.
But yeah, to start with, I've decided to make a new RSS feed and website for the podcast because we're having a lot of fun doing this, and Paolo still hasn't abandoned me. Thank you very much. I'm very happy you're still here. Not to be very a bad friend or anything, but I didn't expect it.
Really?
Yeah. I'm glad you still have energy to be recording this.
Well, I mean, talking about books is always very fun outlet for my emotions. And
that's good.
Yeah. I can't say that I can't wait to talk about the next trilogy, especially now.
Okay.
Like today I want to talk about this so much, but I have to wait, so...
I haven't finished reading it. The other big trilogy we're going to do is called something Earthquake Apocalypse Swearing with Rogas. What's it called?
It's the Broken Earth trilogy
by J.K. Jemisin?
N.K.
N.K. Jemisin, sorry.
N.K. Jemisin. Yes.
So that's coming out later. That's also another thing I'll talk about later, our plans for the future episodes. But anyway, like I was saying, there's going to be a new website. It's just called Mindduck Books, and I'm going to separate it from Mindduck Japan. So the other feed, other website's going to be just the anime and Japan and like life in Japan. And we're going to do like a sole only books show because it looks like we're going to be able to do this every other week. If it's a trilogy, I'll do like a weekly episode thing, like with the Free Body trilogy. Yeah, so that's one thing I'm going to cover. We got some messages from listeners. Thank you for listening. And thank you for correcting us about the pronunciation of names of the free body problem. Which I'm not surprised we messed up.
Yes.
And I'm going to make Twitter and Facebook and other social media crap, Instagram stuff. And I'm going to post maybe weekly, maybe every other day. I'll see quotes from the books that we read with links to the episode that we covered the books on. I like quotes, and I always reread Dune quotes.
Yes.
Because these are the best.
Yes, you gave me the Dune quote boat. And like you told me about it, and I've been following it ever since. And so every day I can have my daily dose of Dune quotes.
Yeah, I'm following 2 things like that on Twitter, and that's the only things I like about Twitter, to be honest. So that's what inspired me to do something similar. So there's the Dune quote bot, and then there is Star Trek Jean-Luc Picard quote of the day or something. So I like those. So I'd like to do something similar. I'd like to pick some quotes and just put them on the social media if you're following us, and hopefully it's going to give you some food for thought, and inevitably it's going to transform into a copy of the Dune quote bot, because when you start talking about Dune, it's never going to end.
Well, yes.
Yeah, so we already started talking about it, so let me just go over it real quick. For the future episodes, we are going to do the trilogy we just mentioned from N.K. Jemisin. We're also going to do another episode about Lovecraft. The book is called Shadow over Innsmouth, which is a novelette.
Short story.
It's not a short story, it's a little bit longer. I think it's like 160, 180 pages, so it's almost a book.
Under 800 pages, to me, it's a short story.
Okay. I see. The reason I'm doing this episode is that one of our listeners had a lot of critique about our podcast, so I just invited him on because he loves Lovecraft and he knows a lot about it, so that's coming up. And we're also going to do an episode about Clive Barker and the Hellbound Heart in the future. That's like a horror story, one of my favorite writers, and also a Czech writer because I'm Czech. It's like a action-packed vampire story that I wanted to mention, and I wanted to see what Paolo thinks. So hopefully he's not going to give up and make it until the end.
I'll try.
Okay, thank you. And one last thing, I also invited Yas, who was on the Mind Duck Japan podcast. We spent a bunch of time together in the hospital. If you want to know more about that, listen to episode 26 of the Mind Duck Japan podcast. And we're going to discuss the Foundation series and the first book by Isaac Asimov called Foundation. So that's about it. Anything I forgot about the future plans?
Well, the next trilogy we're going to cover, which I guess will be the coming episode, is the Broken Earth trilogy. Which
so the first one is called The Fifth Season.
The Fifth Season. The second one is the Obelisk Gate, and the third one is the Stone Sky.
We've heard a lot of good things about it. Paolo's already read the first two.
Yes.
Any teaser about how you feel about it?
I felt better after finishing the second book.
Okay.
But I'm reading the third book. I don't know if that says anything, but...
Well, it's you're compelled enough to finish the story, I guess.
Yes.
Well, I wasn't sure I wanted to read the second book, but after we've talked about it a bunch, it made me feel like it's better than I thought initially, so hopefully I'm not gonna be disappointed. Well, on this episode, like I said, we'd like to catch up and just discuss some books that we've been reading, and we have decided not to talk about them like a full episode because it's not really worth it. I've been reading a few things. One of them was a Portuguese poet that wrote a book called The Book of Disquiet, and I have nothing to say about it. I told Paolo about it. What do you remember I said about it? Do you remember anything?
I don't remember, to be honest.
I got this book as a Reddit gift Secret Santa exchange, and somebody told me I asked for weird stuff, and this is the weirdest thing that they could find, and it's like a famous person in Portugal. And he just writes about life and like thoughts, and I didn't like it at all. So I'm just not gonna talk about it. I didn't read it the whole thing anyway.
I mean, we established it in the first episode that neither of us likes poetry. So.
Yeah, he doesn't write poems. He just writes like thoughts, like train of thought. I imagine him sitting in a bar somewhere or like in a cafe watching people pass and just having like epiphanies and like realizations about his life.
Writing them on a napkin.
Just writing random stuff. And sometimes there is like a resemblance of a thought. Sometimes there is like a little bit of a rhyme, like he's got a section. But other than that, it's just like slice of life, like nothing's happening. So I don't really see the appeal, but yeah. So anyways, the book I've read that was really long, I'd like to discuss today, is by Clive Barker, I already mentioned. I really like Clive Barker for many reasons. One of the reasons is that I like dirt. Do you like dirt, Paolo?
Dirt?
Yes.
What do you mean? Is this a Red Hot Chili Pepper reference?
Oh, I don't know. I don't listen to that so much.
There is a song called I Like Dirt.
Oh, I should listen to that.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like, we both live in Japan, and I feel Japan is too clean.
Okay.
It's making me anxious.
All right.
Like the streets are too polished and clean and shiny, and everything's too cutesy and like neat. There is no dirt in my life anymore. Yeah. Do you feel like that sometimes?
Yes, but in a good way. I hate dirt.
Okay. Well, I hate dirt too, but sometimes I miss it, I guess. I don't really know how to describe this.
I mean, I understand what you mean, but like, I remember the first time I went back to Italy after living in Japan, I noticed it much more, but like, to me it has been a positive change.
Yeah, that's true. I also mean like mental, like psychological, like just, just something slimy, grimy, grim and horrible. Doesn't happen in Japan. So Clive Barker writes horror stories, and this book helped me cope with this problem of living in Japan very much.
Okay.
I love Clive Barker for the characters. He's got the slimiest villains you can think of. And he writes his books in a way that portrays people very naturalistically. Like he writes about like human urges, and like sometimes it's like a little sexual, sometimes it's like very graphic and gory, and it's very, very well like painted picture of like an awful being, like be it a person or some kind of a demon or something. And he's famous for the Hellraiser horror movies that you might have seen. So yeah, I really like his horror movies and horror stories. And he's famous for the Book of Blood, which is like 5 books with short stories that are super bloody. I used to love it as a teenager. You can imagine me like...
Yeah, it's a very edgy title.
I played Mortal Kombat and did fatalities in Mortal Kombat, and then I was like, yeah, I'm gonna read this Book of Blood. Oh my god, it's so edgy.
It is really edgy. Okay. I can imagine like a grindcore, hardcore metal band like in the Book of Blood.
That's his reputation, but I think he's more clever than that. I think his stories are more interesting. Like the characters are really, really well fleshed out, especially the bad characters, like the villains. I don't remember better villains like in any other books. So I read a book by him called Weaveworld, which is not the usual thing he writes. It's a fantasy book. It's about 800 pages. It's really long. Have you heard about any of this?
I only heard about you talking about it.
Have you been put off or interested?
Well, you were not so enthusiastic about it, so I guess I wasn't really excited about it, but at the same time, like...
I guess I put you off.
I would say this. Like, it didn't give me... Like, regardless of your judgment on it, it didn't give me any special reason to really care about it.
Yeah.
So
I think that was right. I think he wrote better things. Some people online said this is his best work because it's very imaginative, which he is good at imagining like very dreamlike, nightmarish, like otherworldly things, which is in this book. And it covers a story that's very simple to sum up. There are these magical beings called the seer kind, and there are people, and they're called cuckoos, because I guess they're just idiots. And one character accidentally gets access to the world of the seer kind that's hidden out of the sight of normal people. And it's hidden in a carpet. So they magically have woven themselves into like a carpet. And you can like magically fall into the carpet into a different hidden world of magical beings and magic and stuff. Some characters have been expelled into exile from this, and they are seeking their revenge. And then there is like this super villain, super bad force called the Scourge that's trying to exterminate all these magical beings because reasons. And I don't want to explain everything. But like I said, the characters are great. The like horror is very well written, but the story is very dragged out, and it's super long and super stretched out. And I struggled. Got like 3 big sections, almost like 3 books into one volume. And I read the first one, was like, okay. The second one, I've had enough. And then I had to take a break a few months. And then I did it. I finished the last part, and it was the best part. So I'm happy I did, but it wasn't like anything great.
Okay.
I would sum it up like somebody said online that reading this book or some of his similar books by Clive Barker is like if you had your favorite alcoholic cocktail and you had a swimming pool of it, and you had to get from the shallow end to the deep end, and you would be like accidentally drinking the alcohol and getting more like dreary and drunk and like more fed up with it, but at the same time it's still cool and enjoyable and exciting, but it's too much of it and it's too dragged out, and it's ultimately just a struggle to get through it. So
this is a very unique comparison. Pool of your favorite cocktail.
I like this review on Goodreads, that's why I wanted to mention it.
Okay. Yes.
There's one more thing I want to say about Clive Barker and like this story. That's the sex, because I said about other stories that I am always annoyed when there is random sexual stuff that doesn't go anywhere, and this is very much the opposite with this writer. He is able to use like sexual things in the story for a purpose. So he's really able to portray people like what they really want, what they really enjoy, what they really feel. Of course, sexual life is very much involved in this, and he's able to include it in the horror of everything. So I think that's very original about him.
It shows the horror of having a sexual life.
Not the horror of having it, but the, I don't know how to say without being too graphic. Like what happens in this story.
Okay.
Like, yeah, but it's not that bad. It's not so dirty, but it's like not the usual thing you would read.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there is like a random note I have written down. Like the main character gets some superpowers. Like he or she gets involved into some magic, and she's got this power, and this power is only transferable to women. Only women can like utilize the force. It's called menstruum.
Okay.
Like, I was like, excuse me.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit like stupid, but then yeah, it's just the name. The magic itself is not that bad in the story. It's actually very clever how they talk about it, but I thought the name was funny.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like a very serious name.
Yeah, the bad characters in the story are great. Like they're just menacing, awful, horrible beings. And do you remember any like really, really good villains in books, by the way?
Well, excluding books where like there's always that gray area, so it's hard to tell who the villain is. I guess like A Song of Ice and Fire is probably the most famous example of that.
Oh,
where,
yeah,
like,
okay.
I mean, you can say some characters are the villains, but then, it's a lot of a matter of perspective. So, good villains, let me think.
I think my favorite villain is from the second book of Dune, the Dune Messiah.
Ah, yes.
That's probably my all-time like villain in the story.
That's a very, very good villain. You mean the face dancer? Yeah. So yeah, that's a very good villain. I really liked him. In the books I'm reading now, so the one I mentioned before, the Broken Earth trilogy, I think the Guardians are very interesting villains.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about them definitely in the future episodes.
I think that a difference between books and other medium, it's harder to make an exceptionally memorable villain because the proportion of time you spend with the villains is, generally speaking, so much lower compared to movies or like comics and other things, for the simple fact that those stories are shorter stories, so the narration time is shorter. So
yeah, I think that's also a good point why I like Clive Barker, because he gives the villains like even more time than the main characters sometimes. So he really gets into like the bad guys.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, so I think that's all about the Weaveworld. I don't think I would recommend it. It has to be cut down to be more enjoyable. There are many nice ideas, like they have a concept about memories, and if you don't remember something, it virtually ceases to exist, and it's connected to the magic and stuff. It's pretty cool, and the story wasn't bad. The characters were great, but too long, and it was a struggle to finish.
I see. So
let's move on to the other book that Paolo's read.
So that would be the first of the Dragonlance saga, the original saga. So Dragons of Autumn Twilight by Weis and Hickman. For those who don't know, this is one of the D&D, so Dungeons and Dragons stories. It was a very popular module for at least D&D 3rd edition. I'm not sure if it was also for 2nd or 1st, but one of the reasons why it matches D&D so well is that originally this was a D&D adventure. So Weis, so one of the two authors, she was playing this campaign with her friends, and then she decided to write a book out of it.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes. For those who play D&D and read this book, it's really apparent.
I see.
Like, it's really easy to tell that this is a D&D adventure.
Okay.
And
which the listeners don't know that you're a dungeon master, by the way. Never said that.
Yeah, I've been playing D&D for half my life.
Oh, I didn't know that either. Yeah. How long have you been the master or the storyteller?
I mean, I've always rotated between being a player and being a dungeon master, but I think the first time I seriously tackled the dungeon master role, I think I was 15.
Oh, okay, that's very early.
Yeah, so that is basically half my life. I started pretty early.
Okay.
Like I didn't have a lot of experience as a player when I started. Anyway, this book has been republished by Wizards of the Coast, which is the publishing company which owns D&D.
Yeah, I was about to ask that actually, because I always hear this name because I love Baldur's Gate and Icewind Dale and all these games, so I always have Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah. That's the Forgotten Realms. That's the most famous setting for D&D, the most famous official setting, which is the Forgotten Realms settings, which is based originally on the novels by Salvatore.
I've read some of them, by the way.
Yeah. I have never read them. Honestly, I'm not so interested.
Okay.
I don't know why I decided to read these instead. Mainly, I guess, because I already knew some of the things about Drizzt and... Drizzt. Drizzt is the Italian parody.
I didn't know there was an Italian parody.
Yeah, there is an Italian webcomic parody.
Okay.
So I wanted to read Dragonlance, and one of the reasons was also because there is a Blind Guardian song based on that.
Okay.
So I was really curious, and one of our coworkers also recommended it. For now, I only read the first book. There are a crap ton of books and sagas. They started writing these in the 80s. They're still writing them. I started from the original book, and I already bought the second and third book of the original trilogy. So the first one is Autumn, so Autumn Twilight. The second one is Winter, and the third one is Spring. They also released the summer book much later, but I'm not sure if I read that or not.
So how was it? Did you like it?
Yeah, so it is a good book. It is one of those books that I feel I've read at the wrong time in my life, because I think this is a book which I would have absolutely loved if I had been 15 or 16, so back when I was starting to play D&D. It is clearly a book for young adults. It is a very simple story. It's not stupid, but it is simple. There are the heroes, and there is the prophecy, and they will become the heroes who save the world. And the interactions between the characters and the characters themselves are the reasons why if someone plays D&D knows this character is that clearly not only they are D&D classes and they use D&D skills and spells, but also they really feel like the kind of characters D&D players would make, and some of the jokes they make.
Is that a good thing for a story?
It's not. It's neither a good nor a bad thing.
Okay.
I think it's just something that if you are not expecting it, or if you are not used to it, it might sound a little strange. Like some of the things they do and say. Besides that, I think it's a very easy read. It's nothing unique or exceptional or revolutionary, but it is a nice fantasy story with nice characters, enjoyable moments. It's pretty light. There are a few dramatic moments, but I think that's the part that I kind of fell flat on me the most. But I feel like I would have loved back when I was 15 or 16.
I see.
Because, the dramatic parts are kind of I know that, this character will not actually die, or I know that this is not actually so dramatic or anything like that.
A question I have about the story is it in any way surprising, or did you feel like it was just the usual kind of adventure?
What I would say is it's not surprising. And you can kind of guess where it's going, almost all the time. But it's still worth reading it. Okay. If you like D&D, if you like fantasy, and if you just want to read... I read this after the Three-Body trilogy, because I really wanted to read something that was fantasy, and it was just, to turn my brain off. Okay. And it does that really well. It gave me a lot of inspirations for D&D, and a lot of ideas. Yeah,
that's what I want to mention. Maybe it's good for people who want to improve their storytelling.
Yeah. And I think it's a good way. Again, I would recommend it especially to a younger audience. But for adults, it can be a good way to fall in love with fantasy again. Not the unique, dramatic, the Broken Earth trilogy, which is this super strange and dark fantasy. Just, remind yourself why high fantasy can be really enjoyable. So yeah, I'd say it's worth reading it, and it's very easy. It's not so long. It's a small book.
So do you want to continue with the sequels?
I will read the next 2 books. I already bought them.
Sounds good. Sounds like it's a good, relaxing read.
Yeah, it's good, especially like, if you're reading it while commuting or like you're having a break at work and you don't want to use your brain too much.
Okay. Well, thanks for telling us about it.
Oh, thank you.
Sounds fun for D&D players.
Yes. For those who don't know, Philip tried D&D once with us and gave up on it. I'm still bitter about it.
Oh, so sorry. My reasoning is that I have too many things I want to do and it's too time consuming. Like, I like it, but it's too long.
I mean, we've been playing for over 2 years, so...
Well, I really like the concept, I really like the idea, I like the premise, I like the character roleplay, I like the storytelling, all the parts I like, and the sum of it I very much not enjoy, because it always ends up just, you just listen to people talk for a bit, trying to decide something, and I get very easily annoyed when people can't agree on something, and just like, I don't know.
Okay.
I have too many hobbies and I don't have time to like start this one that's got so much time requirements. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. It's understandable. I think as a player, it's it's a commitment, but if you just talk about like time itself, it's not too much.
Okay.
I mean, it's a couple of hours a week, not even every week.
Okay.
But it is a commitment. Like, it is one of those things where, like, supposedly like every Thursday night you're playing D&D or something like that. That's what I always ask when people want to start playing is like, are you ready to commit to that?
Yeah, and also the struggle with trying to make people come at the same time, and everybody have times and everybody is like busy, and always like it's just a struggle I don't want to go through.
Yeah,
so it's not that I didn't like it, it's more the other reasons.
The logistics. That's true.
I can only imagine how much time it takes for you as a person who has to prepare the story and tell it. That has to be much, much more time consuming.
It takes a long time, especially at the beginning when you're preparing the adventure and preparing the setting. Because especially in my case, I don't like using pre-made settings. I always make my own.
Exactly.
So I need to make the maps and decide everything. That takes quite some time. Beyond that, preparing a session doesn't necessarily take time. It depends on...
So do you like that better than just joining an adventure?
Like as a player?
Yes.
I thoroughly enjoy both. Like I've been doing both for a very long time. I mean, DMing is probably more fun, but it can be more stressful. And as you said, it requires much more preparation and much more dedication. Even within the session itself. Like as a player, you can take 5 minutes off. As a DM, you need to be like focusing from start to finish. But like, I think there's nothing more enjoyable for me than when I prepare a story and I can tell the players are enjoying what I presented them with.
Yeah.
I think that's one of my favorite things in life.
Okay. So. I didn't know you were so passionate about it. That's nice.
Well, that's why I've been doing it for so long.
Have you ever done like an online stream with recording people being the characters and stuff?
Yeah. I've actually streamed D&D when I was in Italy. I mean, I liked it because it's fun to have a bigger audience. But I think for that, it is a much bigger stress. And I think if I did it again, I would put much stricter requirements on the players.
I see. Well, I guess that's all about the 2 books.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it looks like we have time to talk about physics.
Yes.
The free problem.
Also, as a way to segue into the next section, one of the comments we received was, especially about the pronunciation of the name of the author, was from another podcast. So it is the Rehydrate podcast, which, I mean, for people who have read the 3-Body Problem will immediately get the reference. And they were very kind in letting us know about some of our mistakes and have this very interesting podcast where they go through the whole 3 books.
I really like it, actually. I've been listening to them. They have 20-minute episodes, 2 chapters from the book each time, and they discuss the story and their thoughts, and they're much more informed, and they know much more about the history of China and the writer and all the stuff around the book, which we don't got into in our episode. So we thoroughly recommend it if you're interested into the series.
Yes.
So go to Rehydrate.space, which is a cool URL. I'll put a link in the description of this episode.
Yeah, that's your segue.
Thanks. So if you're going to read The Remembrance of Earth's Past by Liu Cixin, and if you don't want to be spoiled, stop listening, please. We're going to get into some more details about the three-body problem and the Dark Forest and all that. So if that's the case, thanks for listening. See you in the next episode. But if you want to hear us rant more about the books and more stuff that I wanted to get off of my mind just quickly, let's get into that. So final warning, spoilers for Three-Body Problem and stuff. And I wanted to mention some connections from our friends at the Rehydrate podcast. One of them was the pronunciation of the writer's name that I'm trying to say correctly. I'm sure it's still wrong, like Liu Cixin.
Yes.
Paolo recently told me about the Japanese pronunciation of that, which was hilarious.
It was Jikin.
So Japanese people say Jikin. We said Chichin. The closest to the actual pronunciation, it's Tsushin. But I'm not sure about that, so don't quote me on it. Another thing we messed up was the whole discussion about the 3D, 4D, 2D transition into dimensions and how they had the sophon, and the actual thing was that they had the sophon in 11 dimensions and then they unfolded it into 3 dimensions. That's why it was so big. So we completely messed it up. I don't know what I said. Which is a segue to talk about these like dimensional things. I can't stop thinking about it because I am trying to make up my mind if I feel like it's realistic or not. and I still feel like it's completely unrealistic. How do you feel about the realistic like physics of the mechanics of unfolding a higher dimensional object into lower dimensions? Do you feel like it's realistic?
I mean, it's realistic to the point where, okay, let me rephrase that. It's both, and what I mean by that is it's unrealistic for what our perception of physics is now, but at the same time it's realistic to the point where you can say, you know, with advanced technology, even something like that could become realistic. I mean, it's kind of like light speed travel. This moment in time, light speed travel is something unrealistic, like it doesn't make sense, it's not possible, but at the same time, like if you assume potential like technological growth, which is basically endless, then it becomes realistic.
Well, I still feel
what I want to say is that it's not magic, but it's so advanced that it might as well be. Yeah.
Okay. I still feel like it cannot be done because it doesn't make sense. Like I can't wrap my mind around it. And I'm going to talk about this project called Miegakure, which if you search for Miegakure, it's a guy's nickname or like a project name online, and he's been working on a 4D puzzle game for about 8 years now. I was super excited about it when it was announced, and it looks really cool, and it's never going to come out because it's already been 8 years and there are hardly any updates from him. I think he's just mad by working on this. So he's made a system of describing and modeling 4D objects.
Is that a Lovecraft reference?
No.
Because he's looking into a higher dimension and so it became...
okay. Maybe that's what happened. No Dune reference in this episode so far.
Yeah, maybe a rat with a human face will come out of his heart.
Okay. Well, so he made this system where you can model and make actual 4D objects and then project them into 3D. And he made an app or a program called 4D Tools or 4D Toys. It's really cool. If you're interested in any of this, it's a really, really nice visualization of what 4D and 3D interactions mean. And recently there has been an update from him after like years and years of nothing. And he's made a video on YouTube about the Klein bottle in 4D. Have you seen it by any chance, the video?
I think I have.
It's a very simple Klein bottle in 4D. So the Klein bottle, if you don't know, it's like an object that, if you imagine a bottle and the top where the bottle opens gets stretched out and it connects to the top of the bottle connects to the bottom of the bottle. So it's like going through itself to have just one surface So the whole object is just one surface, if you imagine it, because it's going like wrapping itself on itself into itself. And it's not possible in 3D because it has to go through itself. It's a very famous object, like a 3D object. If you have no idea what this is, just type Klein bottle on Google and you'll see pictures and models. And with these tools, the 4D tools, he made this object in 4D, which makes perfect sense. Because you can make the part that intersects with each other. In 3D it intersects, but in 4D it would go around the bottle into itself, which is a perfect example of what happens in the books and what the science is about, how you can go into another dimension to evade an object in the third dimension and go in on itself again. So therefore successfully making an object that's just one surface, but it's like wrapping on itself. So it's very clever, very, very fascinating. So I like this. I love the 3D Toys app and everything. It's showing 3D intersections, like cutouts of 4D objects. So you can imagine you have like a 3D cube that's your viewport, and you're moving it around like the 4D objects, which you obviously can't see, but you can see cuts out of it, if you rotate it or if you move the viewport, so you can like intersect a sphere into it or like a cube into it or something. So it's all fine and dandy. I absolutely understand this. So then what I don't understand is converting the objects from one dimension to the other. And I don't think it makes any sense, because you can do this, which we just described. You can have a cutout of the object in the lower dimension. Or you can unfold it, which they talk about in the books. So let's say you have a cube in 3D and you unfold it into like squares into 2D. Fine. But that doesn't mean that the cube disappeared from 3D. Like, it's still 3D. It's just flatted out. Like it's still the same thing. It's just been transformed and moved around. It's not like 2D. It's just a different position of the points that make it up. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It didn't transform into a different material or like space.
I mean, I feel like I'm grossly underqualified to talk about any of these, but...
So what I'm trying to say is that if there were 4D objects, and we would be able to see them in 3D and somehow made them aligned in such a way that we would see all of them in 3D, which by that I mean the unfolding, it wouldn't mean that they would become 3D. I think they would just be 4D, but like pressed into 3D in such a way so they would all be visible, but they would still be 4D. If you know what I mean. Like objects that have no volume cannot exist. And that's what we're trying to do here. Like, if you have a 3D object, it's made up of material. And if you flatten it into 2D, the material doesn't disappear unless you make a drawing out of it. When you make a drawing out of it, it's not the object anymore. And that's what they're doing in the book. They're drawing objects. So it's like a template, and you're taking like a template and you're making a picture out of it. Okay, but that doesn't destroy the object. That's just making a picture based on an object. But the original object, there's no reason for it to disappear.
But I guess the thing is, they're just losing a dimension.
But that's the thing I don't think makes sense. Because I don't think there is such a thing as losing a dimension. That's exactly my point. That's the thing that bothers me.
I don't know.
I think losing a dimension doesn't make any sense, because you cannot press an object into another dimension. You can just make a copy out of it or a picture out of it, but you're not using it to do that. You're just like copying to do it.
So what you're saying is just you're making a new object which has a lower dimensional level.
Exactly.
I mean, I honestly don't know. My question would always be, what does it even mean to have different dimensions, given that all we can perceive is 3 dimensions? Like, we say we can perceive 2 dimensions, but that's not actually true. Like, everything we perceive in 2 dimensions is actually in 3 dimensions.
That's true. That's another cat in a bag or problem, conundrum. Yeah. Well, I just wanted to get this off of my chest because it bothers me profusely. I don't think it's possible. So if you have any input, listeners, if somebody's listening, so please send us an email at mindduckbooks@gmail.com and tell us what if you think that reducing objects to lower dimensions by unfolding them or flattening them or whatever makes sense, especially if you're a physicist. Because I feel like having cutouts of 3D cutouts of 4D objects and so on makes sense, but having completely flattened stuff into lower dimensions by losing a dimension doesn't make sense to me at all. Like, I don't think that works. That's all I want to say.
Okay.
I was curious about how you feel, but yeah, you answered.
Yeah, it's pretty complicated.
Okay. So just a couple of other things very quickly I want to mention was that after editing the episodes and after talking about all these books so much, I felt like the second book, The Dark Forest, the more we talked about it, the more I liked it. And the last book, The Death's End, the more we talked about it, the less I liked it. Did you feel like that?
I think so. I think the more we talked about the second book, the more I liked it.
Which is a sign for me every time about the story that it's well thought out, because obviously there will be things you miss.
Yeah.
If you have a bad story like Matrix 4, the more you talk about it, the more painful it gets.
I haven't watched Matrix 4.
Don't watch it.
Okay.
Literally anything you say about it makes it worse. It's so bad. Okay. Like, the only thing that's good about it is that it's like a satire, like director's commentary on the industry. That's the only thing that it is.
Is the music good?
No.
No.
No, it's not good.
Wow.
And the action is not good either.
That's unexpected.
Everything I'm gonna say about it is bad, so let's not talk about it.
Okay. All right.
So I guess the last question I wanted to ask you is, obviously we talked about the first contact with an alien civilization, an alien species and all this like stuff. So I'm sure you think about this, or you have thought about this, what the most realistic like alien encounter would look like. Do you have anything you would say about that? Like, what you would imagine?
I mean, I still think that the easiest thing is that we'll probably see like most people imagine like, oh, when you see the aliens, you see the aliens like landing on Earth or something. But the highest chance is that probably you just see like some waves, like radio waves or whatever, emitted from some alien civilization. So at the beginning, it wouldn't be anything spectacular. Just waves. It could be just we become able to detect the activity of other species, not necessarily like because they're sending anything, just because they're using technology.
Let me ask you a different question. If we found an alien species on a different planet that was just microscopic and it was just bacteria, and maybe they were even intelligent, or I don't know what even intelligent means, do you think people would care? Like, let's say we went to Mars and there was a bunch of like plankton that's intelligent, and they're just making colonies and like building miniaturized like colonies of stuff, and they're just living there. Do you think anybody would care?
I mean, if it's just like bacteria or something like that, I think some people would care and most people wouldn't, just because like, I mean, those things exist on Earth and we never care about them on Earth.
Does it make you sad that people wouldn't care?
I mean, I guess maybe people would care, but it wouldn't be as, again, because I think most people have this expectation that aliens would be like, meeting aliens would be like in movies. So just the idea that, oh, you know, there are bacteria on other planets, and how like insanely revolutionary that would be for science. I don't think it would have the same impact on society. Yeah. I mean, a few years ago, there was already like, I mean, it hasn't been proven yet and it might be wrong or anything, but according to some research, there is a high chance that in Venus's atmosphere there are bacteria. But again, like, no one said anything. Most people were just like, yeah, you know, oh, they found this thing, blah, 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 whatever.
Yeah, that was my answer. I feel like it's going to be very anticlimactic, because it's not going to be something you can directly interact with. Yeah. And like we talked about in the books, like discussion, that it's going to be so remote and so far and so time dilated, or so much time would pass if you even wanted to see it, that it wouldn't mean anything to anybody on Earth.
Yeah, I think so.
Which is very sad to me.
I mean, that's the unfortunate thing about the universe. It's way too big.
And I also feel like the other beings could be so different time and scale wise that it wouldn't make any sense to interact the same like we feel about the bacteria, or like the nano scale or something, or like very macro scale. So if there was some intelligent life that was so slow and so large, that how would we even, it would, let's say it would pass like 10, 20 years would pass just to send a message, then it doesn't even make sense to communicate in any meaningful way.
Yeah. I completely agree.
Which also makes me very sad.
Yeah, I always think that the more you study about the universe, the scarier and sadder it gets.
So either you get killed off or you just can't even talk.
And I mean, there are like, that's before you consider the fact that like in the universe there are like dozens of things which could destroy the Earth like at any time.
Yes.
So that's cool.
Yeah. So I guess that's all I have wanted to say. Thanks for bearing with me.
No, thank you.
Coming up in the future episodes, I think we're gonna do one book of the Earth's Earthquakes series. I keep forgetting the name.
Broken Earth.
Broken Earth.
Yes, we're doing the 5th season.
I'm really happy that you're still with me. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. Thank you for still letting me say my nonsense on this podcast.
Of course. It's great. So see you in the next episodes, and thank you for listening. We're happy that we can do this. Thanks again for listening. This is Philip from the future speaking. So like we said during this episode, I have battled all the Twitters and all the bots and all the authentication nonsensical obstacles. And I have created a Twitter bot of my own. So like we talked about, I'm going to tweet quotes from the books we've been reading on the podcast. So follow us on Twitter for the quote of the day from the books we're reading. Please rate us on Apple Podcasts. And see you in the next episode, where we're going to look at the first of the Broken Earth trilogy, called The 5th Season.